I got an interesting question on one of my YouTube videos regarding the Vivo X100 Ultra and the Vivo X200 Pro. And the question was regarding the portrait mode versus the humanistic street mode, because both of them work with fake or can work with fake bokeh. And the question was, when you take a portrait shot with either of those and the different versions, what is the difference between the shot? So let's check this out. So let's get started. Like I said, I got this question for both of them here, the X100 Ultra and the X200 Pro, and I will answer the question on both, and I will also compare them both with each other to see which one is a bit superior when it comes to taking the portraits, and also, of course, how natural the portraits look like, and if there is a difference between the normal portrait mode and the humanistic street mode and taking portraits with this one. So first of all, what's the humanistic street mode? Let's dig into. So I just take the X100 Ultra here, for example, go into the normal camera application, and here you can find a little arrow, so it's a bit of hidden. If you press on it, it goes into the humanistic street mode. And here you can see some of the default settings. First of all, probably not the 85mm. I think by default it's like at 35mm. But we have here on the left certain settings, like the focal lengths that we can change. So from 35 to 50 to 85, and 28 and 24 are also possible here. So you can see there's no 135mm on the X100 Ultra. The X200 Pro that is there in the background has 135mm as well there, which is like a crop in from the 3.7 times zoom. We have EV control here, we have shutter speed, and we have aperture. And this aperture is a virtual aperture. So you can see by default it's set to f5.6, which makes sense for street, but we can also go like down to f0.95, so it's a virtual one. And I can go like to f2, which is like the one that I will use there. We can set the white balance manually or automatically, which is possible here. And then you can see also there's like the default color profile is not size natural or vivid. It is textured, and I will leave it as textured because this is probably what most people will use when they use the humanistic street mode. And I'll be completely honest, this is the one that makes more sense for the humanistic street mode in my opinion. So let's keep it at this. And but we can also change it to size natural as well. And for the comparison between this one here and the normal portrait mode, I probably will leave it to size natural, because when I go out here and go into normal portrait mode, you can see that here we have certain size profiles there. I will leave it to natural, which probably is closest to what size natural is. And then I will also go to f2 here, which is the virtual aperture. And this I will do on both of them. And then we will do a comparison at 85mm. And probably 85 is the maximum, because the humanistic street mode doesn't have the possibility to go here any higher on the X100 Ultra. You can see I cannot go here up and down or move it all around. I can only go to 85mm here as the maximum. And we will go probably 35, 50 and then 85 and compare the humanistic street mode with the normal portrait mode first on one device, and then later we'll compare them with each other. So let's do it. Let's start by checking out the various different cameras and the humanistic street mode. What we can see here at 35mm on both, using the same setting like f2.0 as virtual aperture, that we have much darker kind of face picture on the X200 Pro, where it's much more exposed on the X100 Ultra. And you can also see that it is a bit more red on the X200 Pro in contrast to the X100 Ultra. And when you zoom in, you can see that the 1-inch type sensor and a bit of more larger pixels are really helping with the resolution and with the detail level tremendously. You can see the fake eyebrows on both a bit. but the detail level where it starts to create the fake eyebrows from is much better on the X100 Ultra than on the X200 Pro. And then, yeah, it looks like I'm looking ill a little bit on the X200 Pro, where I'm looking normal or fine, I would say, a bit more yellowish maybe on the X100 Ultra. But what we can see clearly is that the algorithm for the bokeh is much better on the X200 Pro. You can see my hair was exactly the same, and you can see that here are the little bits and pieces, but here you can see the very tiny hair that it just blurred out completely and merged with the background, which is not appearing on the X200 Pro. So yes, I'm not sure what it's using there, why it is able to recognize them. Maybe it's the ISP's AI that helps there with the cutout, but the cutout is much more realistic and much finer, more detailed on the X200 Pro. And this is something that I noticed throughout all the photos that I took here. Then let's go to 50mm, which is the next step basically. We see the same, it's just a crop in. You can see it's a little bit more detailed maybe here on the X200 Pro, but it's still way too dark. I look way too ill there. It's a bit too reddish, maybe too dark, too much contrast added, where it's much clearer here and much more natural looking on the X100 Ultra. And this is why I would say yes in cameras, especially for portrait shots, but also like this humanistic street mode in the 50mm, 35mm range, the X200 Pro is losing against the X100 Ultra still. My eye color much more realistic, the eyebrows, my hair color much more realistic, though still the cutout is a little bit better on the X200 Pro. Look at the little hairs here in details and look how it is blurred out on the X100 Ultra. So yes, with the cutouts, definitely a win for the X200 Pro. This is now 85mm, both utilize the 3.7x telezoom, large 200 megapixel telezoom lens there. Again, the same issue with too dark, and just the hair color is wrong, where here it is much even clearer, you can see, on the X100 Ultra, which is quite interesting because you look at the, not at the eyebrows, look at the, how they call the hair here on my eyes. I'm not sure how they call it. You can write down in the comment section maybe. Clearly visible there. Here it's a bit like, yeah, it's also visible, but it's not as clearly separated, which is quite interesting. So yes, the X100 Ultra is doing a tremendously better job there. Though I think it looks like a bit more artificial. Like when you look closely, there's a little bit of grain going on, of sharpness going on that it applies here. Again, with the cutout, you can see that the little hairs are still like nicely blurred out on the X200 Pro, where here they're just completely gone on the X100 Ultra. So the AI still has, I think, something to do there. I'm not sure how they can fix it somehow, but you can see it here as well. The little hairs are like still there on the X200 Pro, where here's just a rough cut. So this is something that probably the ISP is doing there. Here, like this, for example, completely gone here. Same situation, but same hairstyle. I didn't do anything with my hair, it's just gone. X200 Pro has then the 135mm that in humanistic mode on the X100 Ultra for some reason we cannot use, so the maximum is 85mm. In terms of detail level here, it's just a crop in, so nothing really improved. You can see there was something in my eyebrow there apparently. Maybe something from the breakfast still, I don't know, but yeah, it looks like a crop in. There's not much more in terms of detail level, I would say, that we win here. So I'm not really saying that it's a bad thing to, let's just compare it here. If I just zoom in, zoom in, and here zoom in a little bit, you can see it's clearly still better on the X100 Ultra in comparison, clearer on the X100 Ultra in comparison to the X100 Pro. So yes, I think, yeah, in terms of detail levels, the X100 Ultra does a better job in the humanistic street mode. And I think also the exposure of the face is much better, where here it's just like, you can see like it is too dark, too reddish looking there. And yeah, this one is better here in terms of exposure on the X100 Ultra. Now let's come to the interesting part, humanistic street mode versus portrait mode. This time on the X200 Pro, I will only like focus detailedly on the X200 Pro. And here is the interesting thing. You can see that the X200 Pro has, in comparison to my previous photo, a different kind of exposure and it looks completely different. Why is that the case? Simply because on my first one, I was using the textured mode, the default mode for the Humanistic Street Mode, but I was using it on the X100 Ultra and the X200 Pro. Then on the X200 Pro, I switched to the Zeiss Natural mode, and I presume that the portrait mode on the X200 Pro, the normal camera mode, photo mode, is also using the Zeiss Natural. And here you see the differences between them. So we get a nicer exposure now on the X200 Pro. So textured mode, I think, is something that is like doing the weird shit with too much contrast and making the face look bad on the X200 Pro. So if you want to use Humanistic Street Mode, maybe it makes sense to also use the Zeiss Natural mode there, because here I think it looks much more natural. Also a little bit more sharpened up maybe there. But I like the colors a little bit nicer there. When we compare it with the portrait in portrait mode, what we can see here is it looks more artificial on the portrait mode. Face a bit too yellowish, not so warmish as this reddish kind of warm that we have, or pinkish kind of face color that we usually have here. You can see that it's a bit over sharpened maybe, or over processed on the Humanistic Street Mode. But I like the colors much better because they're much more realistic in this manner. Where here it's like less doing this over sharpening maybe, but the colors are, the face is way too yellow in my opinion. And yes, it looks like it's trying to add some information in there on my face, like, but yeah, it's not really doing this very well. The sharpness level being a bit higher or more processed looking on the Humanistic Street Mode, you can also see here in my hair, where you can see that it is blurring out much faster on the portrait mode here, where here it is just a bit sharper there and keeping it more in. In terms of like the f-stop number, both are simulating f.2.0, and the background looks almost realistic on both, but you can see a difference also with the background blur, where here this box is, I think, more in focus still, where here it is less in focus. And it was the same position I was standing in. The same goes for the cable here, a little bit more in focus. But it could be also the higher sharpening applied on the Humanistic Street Mode that is getting me this effect for sure as well. Now let's go to the next one, which looks like this. This is a 50mm shot. Again, it's the same in terms of colors. I like the colors on the Humanistic Street Mode much better, because here it's just too much, a little bit too contrasty and too yellowish on the portrait mode, or the normal portrait mode at 50mm. And what we can see here in terms of sharpness level, however, and details, it's almost the same. There's not much of a difference there now in this case. I think it's still a little bit more sharpening up on the Humanistic Street Mode than on the portrait mode. So the portrait mode is a bit softer. You can see it here also in the hair again. But the difference is like slight. The only thing that you can really see is that a bit more contrast on the normal portrait mode in comparison to the Humanistic Street Portrait. Yeah. And then we have the next one, which is the 85mm, and here they are the closest together in terms of colors, but we still have this more warmish yellowish color on the normal portrait mode, where we have this more realistic skin tone, I would say, on the Humanistic Street Mode. And in terms of detail levels here, quite interesting, both doing and looking the same. It's just that I like the colors on the Humanistic Street Mode a lot better, because this one is just too yellow on the normal one. In terms of detail level, you can see my eyes, eyebrows, and everything else is quite nice. The cutouts are quite nice. You can see a bit of a difference in terms of color. This little duck there in the background. Do I have a duck there? No, it's actually a little pig that I have there. Is a bit more yellowish here, where here it appears to be a bit more orange looking, which might be also the processing there. And then we have one last thing where we have the Humanistic Street Mode here with 135mm, and we have the normal portrait mode. Again, you can see the more yellowish in the face in terms of detail levels. Both should be the same there. Again, I like more realistic colors on the Humanistic Street Mode. So yeah, if you ask me if you want more realistic colors in your portrait shots, don't use the portrait mode, use the humanistic street mode in size natural colors. That gives you way more natural colors then, which is yeah, pretty awesome. Now let's briefly compare the X200 Pro versus the X100 Ultra in the street, in the humanistic street mode with the size natural colors. You can see that again, a little bit more pale on the X200 Pro in comparison to the X100 Ultra, which gives me a bit more red in the face. In terms of like sharpening added, both doing the same. Again, when it comes to the cutout at f2, the X200 Pro is doing a much better job than the X100 Ultra for that matter. And the normal portrait mode looks very similar between the X200 Pro and X100 Ultra. You can see much more yellowish, or yeah, more yellowish in the face color and much more contrasty looking. And I think both doing a little bit in terms of like sharpness and detail levels that they try to get a bit better. You can see that in portrait mode the X100 Ultra has a better cutout again than in the humanistic street mode. So I think the humanistic street mode has to be improved on the X100 Ultra to also get the same kind of cutout level. You can also see that the warmth of my hair color is more realistic on the X200 Pro in comparison to the bit more blackish kind of hair that we see on the X100 Ultra. And yeah, street mode, humanistic street mode again here on both. You can see again that it's brightening up things a little bit more on the X200 Pro in comparison to the X100 Ultra, where my face is, I think, a bit too red on the X100 Ultra in that regard. And again, here it failed with the cutouts. So the cutouts are a big problem in the humanistic street mode. How about when we go into the normal portrait mode? You can see here the cutout also failed on the X100 Ultra. Failed, it was much worse than the X200 Pro. In general, again, I think a bit clearer on the X100 Ultra in comparison to the X200 Pro, which is a bit more artificial looking. But in general, they're doing a fine job. Then this one, again, you have a bit more realistic colors, I think, on the X200 Pro, where here it's eliminating the shadows a bit more, has super detailed shot there in humanistic street mode. I like, look at the eye and look at here. The eye color is much more realistic around my eye, everything much more sharpened up, much more natural looking there. It's just where it fails is, again, a little bit in the hair department. Though here I think you can see how much clearer the X200 Pro is, how much more it can detect. Here I think it's not a total fail on the X100 Ultra. Bit too reddish still, the face color, but here I think the contrast levels are a bit off. And when we switch to the portrait mode on both, you can see that the hairs are much more improved there. It's still a little bit, yeah, more problematic than on the X200 Pro. So the X200 Pro is a better way of dealing with this. The hair color is more realistic X200 Pro. The X100 Ultra is a bit bland there looking. But I think the contrast level and the yellow level is a bit like in the, yeah, here, the shadow area, a bit spooky looking on the X200 Pro, where it's a bit better on the X100 Ultra there for that matter, especially on this eye. You can see it's a bit too dark here. There's the whole exposure there, like a shadow that it didn't get right. And then we can get a bit closer there that we cannot do on the X100 Ultra. So in general, what we can clearly see is the X200 Pro doing a better job with the cutouts in humanistic street mode for sure, and also in the normal portrait mode, where I like the performance of the X200 Pro and the X100 Ultra in terms of getting more realistic shots for sure in the humanistic street mode. On the X200 Pro, only in the size natural color modes. On the X100 Ultra, also in the textured default mode, which is not so overdoing it in terms of shadows and contrasts as the X200 Pro is doing it. But yeah, the humanistic street mode gives me a bit more realistic colors, and in terms of cutouts, at least you can see a slight difference on the X100 Ultra. On the X200 Pro, it's identical. So what's the conclusion now about the humanistic street mode versus the portrait mode on both the X200 Pro and the X100 Ultra? I told you already my facts or what I figured out, and you can see it on screen as well. You can tell me which one you like more, which one is more realistic to you, which one is working a little bit better for you. What I really learned from this is, first of all, that I will use the humanistic street mode a little bit more on the X200 Pro and X100 Ultra, because I think it adds a little bit of value and offers something that is a bit of unique, because it's like an always on portrait mode that you can use directly, and with the user interface being quickly to jump between 35, 50 and 85 millimeters at least on the X100 Ultra and 135 on the X200 Pro, offers a way faster way to take photos and portraits that you like to take. The other option would be like taking the portrait mode and using one of the filters there as well and play around with the filters. Like the vintage filter, for example, sometimes can produce very nice photos, but I don't like that so much for portraits, at least for close-up shots. It's more like for sceneries with a person in there and you want to make it look quite nice. But yeah, this is just my 2 cents. I like the questions that you asked about this humanistic street mode versus portrait mode. This is why I did this video here. So if you have some further suggestions what I should try out on those 2 phones here, on other phones as well, or which phones I should compare and the photos that I want should compare between them, write it on the comment section. Until the next time, bye.